The blizzard had been building for 3 days, turning the Canadian wilderness into a white void that swallowed sound and sight alike. Dr. Marcus Thorne pressed his face against the frost-covered window of his research cabin, watching ice crystals dance in the pale afternoon light. 20 years of studying marine ecosystems had taught him patience, but 3 years of self-imposed exile in these mountains had taught him something else entirely. How to recognize when the universe was about to change everything. The streak of fire that tore across the storm-darkened sky was wrong in every way that mattered. Meteors didn't pulse with internal light. They didn't change direction mid-flight. And they certainly didn't emit the harmonic resonance that made every piece of electronic equipment in his cabin suddenly fall silent. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit without thinking, muscle memory from countless rescue operations during his Coast Guard days taking over. The impact had been close, maybe 2 miles northwest, where the old mining roads disappeared into the tree line. His snowmobile started reluctantly in the bitter cold, its engine coughing black smoke into the Arctic. There, the crash site was impossible to miss. Ancient pines lay flattened in a perfect circle around a crater that glowed with residual heat, melting the snow in steaming rivulets. But what made Marcus's breath catch wasn't the destruction. It was the ship, sleek as a teardrop and dark as obsidian. The vessel seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols pulsed along its hull in colors that had no names, and technology that looked grown rather than built extended from its damaged sections like metallic vines. This wasn't human. This wasn't even close to human. Movement near the ship's shattered cockpit made him freeze. A figure clearly alive but badly injured was trapped beneath a piece of twisted metal. As Marcus approached carefully, his scientific mind cataloged details. The being was humanoid but taller, with skin that held an opalescent quality like mother of pearl. Her clothing seemed to be made of a material that shifted between fabric and armor depending on the angle of view. She was unconscious, breathing shallowly, and losing what appeared to be luminescent blue blood from several wounds. Most striking were her features, noble and sharp, with high cheekbones and an otherworldly beauty that spoke of genetic perfection. Her hair was the color of starlight, silver white and impossibly fine. Every rational part of his mind screamed at him to leave, to call the authorities, to let someone else handle first contact with an alien species. But Marcus had spent his life studying creatures in distress, and the universal language of suffering was the same regardless of species. He worked quickly in the freezing air, using his emergency equipment to free her from the wreckage. She was surprisingly heavy, her body dense with muscle beneath that strange, adaptive clothing. As he lifted her, she stirred briefly, golden eyes opening to meet his for just a moment. In that instant, Marcus saw intelligence, pain, and something else, a flicker of surprise that someone was helping rather than harming her. By the time he got her back to his cabin, the storm had intensified, covering their tracks and hiding any evidence of his rescue mission. As he settled her onto his medical table, Marcus realized he'd just crossed a line from which there would be no return. He was now harboring what might be Earth's first alien visitor, and he had no idea if she was a refugee or the advance scout for an invasion. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear the first helicopters beginning their search. Zevia Morthok, third princess of the Andorian Empire and commander of a dozen conquered worlds, had never woken up vulnerable. Yet here she was, consciousness returning slowly in an unfamiliar place that smelled of wood smoke and something she didn't recognize. Kindness. Perhaps her training kicked in immediately. Assess the situation, identify threats, plan escape routes. But as her golden eyes focused on the primitive medical equipment surrounding her, confusion replaced tactical analysis. She was alive, treated, and apparently free. This made no sense. according to everything she knew about inferior species. The human entered, carrying something that steamed food. She realized he was smaller than she'd expected from the intelligence reports, with gentle brown eyes and graying hair that spoke of wisdom rather than weakness. When he saw she was awake, he didn't reach for weapons or restraints. He simply smiled. "You're safe," he said in the clumsy Earth language she'd studied. "My name is Marcus. How do you feel?" Safe. A concept was foreign to someone who'd spent 3 centuries earning safety through strength and fear. Zevia tried to sit up, her enhanced physiology already beginning to heal the crash injuries. But Marcus gently pressed her back down. "Easy. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your body needs time to recover." 2 days. Her reconnaissance mission was already compromised. The invasion fleet would expect her report within the planetary cycle, and if she failed to contact them, Zevia's breath quickened as the implications hit her. Her people would assume she was dead or captured. They would proceed with the conquest without her intelligence. "You are helping me," she said slowly, her accent making the human words sound musical. Why? It was the same question that had puzzled her since regaining consciousness. In her experience, beings only helped others when they wanted something in return: information, allegiance, or submission. Yet this Marcus asked for nothing. "Because you needed help," he replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. Zevia studied his face for deception, for hidden motives, but found only genuine concern. Her people had prepared her for human weapons, their primitive technology, their fragmented governments. No one had prepared her for this. "My ship," she said carefully, testing his knowledge, "destroyed in the crash." "I'm sorry." Marcus's expression was genuinely sympathetic. "The pieces scattered across the mountain. Even if someone finds them, they won't understand what they're looking at." Relief and despair warred in Zevia's chest. Relief that her technology wouldn't be reverse engineered. Despair that she was truly stranded until her people came looking. Marcus brought her the steaming bowl soup. She realized, made from plants and proteins her enhanced senses identified as non-toxic. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," he said. "But if you're from somewhere else, you should know that others are looking for you. Military types. They're searching every building in a 50-mile radius." The warning was unnecessary. Zevia could hear the aircraft in the distance, systematic in their patterns. But that he would warn her, would risk himself for someone he didn't even know. Double quotes. "I am a scout," she found herself saying. "My people sent me to study your world before." She stopped, unable to finish. "Before they invade," Marcus said quietly. It wasn't a question. Zevia nodded, watching for fear or anger in his expression. Instead, she saw sadness. "Will you tell them we're worth saving?" he asked. "Will you tell them we're worth saving?" He asked. The question hit her like a physical blow. In all her planning, all her preparation for this mission, she'd never considered that the choice might become personal. Agent Victoria Cross had been hunting things that shouldn't exist for 15 years, and she'd learned to trust her instincts over official reports. The satellite imagery showed a meteor impact, but meteors didn't leave radiation signatures that made Geiger counters sing lullabies in languages that didn't exist on Earth. She stood in the mobile command center, studying topographical maps while her team prepared for another sweep. 3 days of searching had yielded fragments of metal that defied analysis and energy readings that shouldn't be possible. Something had crashed in these mountains, and it wasn't from this solar system. Agent Cross called Specialist Palmer from the communications array. "We've got something." Thermal imaging picked up an anomaly at the Thorn Research Station. Victoria moved to the display, her trained eyes immediately spotting the discrepancy. The cabin's heat signature showed standard patterns except for one. Room that registered slightly warmer than it should be consistent with someone running medical equipment more extensively than a single occupant would need. Dr. Marcus Thorne, she read from his file. Marine biologist, former Coast Guard rescue specialist. Lives alone, conducts environmental research. No family, minimal social contacts. She paused, considering. Perfect profile for someone who might help a stranded ... visitor. Her team leader, Sergeant Kim, looked skeptical. You really think he'd harbor an alien? The guy's a scientist, not a conspiracy theorist. Victoria had worked with enough people in crisis situations to understand. Human nature. Scientists are curious by nature. Coast Guard trained to rescue first, ask questions later. If something crashed and survived, Thorne would be exactly the type to render aid. She'd seen it before, good people making choices that put them in impossible situations. The difference was, this time the stakes weren't just personal. This was potentially first contact with an extraterrestrial species, and how humanity handled the next few hours could determine whether that contact remained peaceful. We go in soft, she decided. No tactical gear, no obvious weapons. I want to talk to Dr. Thorne, not spook him into doing something desperate. The drive to the research station took 20 minutes through winding mountain roads. Victoria used the time to review everything they knew about the crash site, the energy signatures, and the missing pieces of technology that had somehow vanished. Between the initial impact and their arrival, Dr. Thorne answered the door before they knocked, which confirmed her suspicions. Innocent people didn't monitor approaching vehicles quite so carefully. Dr. Thorne? I'm Agent Cross, Department of Scientific Investigation. We're looking into some unusual activity in the area. Mind if we ask you a few questions? He was nervous, elevated heart rate, slight tremor in his hands, eyes that darted briefly toward the back of the cabin before focusing on her face. Classic. Signs of someone hiding something significant. Of course, he said, stepping aside. Though I'm not sure how much help I can be. It's pretty isolated up here. Victoria entered the cabin, her trained senses cataloging details. Medical supplies recently used. Food prepared for more than one person. And underneath the wood, smoke and coffee. Something else, ozone and copper. The kind of smell that clung to advanced technology. You're a xenobiologist as well as a marine biologist, she said, noting his extensive library. Must be exciting work, theorizing about what alien life might look like. Theoretical being the key word, he replied. But there was something in his voice, a weight that suggested theory had recently become reality. Victoria moved toward the back of the cabin, noting how Dr. Thorne positioned himself to stay between her and whatever he was protecting. She'd been in enough hostage negotiations to recognize the posture of someone shielding something precious. Dr. Thorne, she said quietly, I know you're trying to do the right thing, but whatever you found, whatever you're protecting, this is bigger than both of us. I need you to trust me. For a moment, she saw him waver, saw the burden of secret knowledge weighing on shoulders that had never been meant to carry the future of two species. Commander Drakthos of the 7th Fleet materialized on the bridge of the battlecruiser Void's Edge as the blue-white marble of Earth filled the forward displays. His four-armed form moved with predatory grace past navigation stations where junior officers monitored the primitive planet's defensive capabilities. Report, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 300 campaigns across 50 worlds. Princess Zevia's beacon went silent 72 hours ago, reported Fleet. Intelligence Officer Zenth. Last transmission indicated successful planetary approach, then nothing. Long-range scans detect the wreckage of her scout ship in the northern continent's mountain region. Drakthos studied the tactical displays with calculating eyes. Zevia was the finest reconnaissance operative in the Empire, trained personally by his own hand. If she had fallen silent, it meant either death or capture. Either scenario required immediate response. Begin deployment of search squadrons. I want every life sign in a 100-mile radius identified and cataloged. If the princess lives, we extract her. If she's dead, double quotes. He paused, considering. We ensure her sacrifice serves the Empire's glory. The planet below seemed so fragile from orbit, its thin atmosphere and single moon making it appear almost childlike compared to the fortress worlds of the Empire. Yet intelligence indicated these humans had somehow survived and thrived despite their obvious limitations. Perhaps that resilience would make them useful as a servitor species. Commander, Zenth's voice held a note of confusion. We're receiving a transmission on Princess Zevia's personal frequency. The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made Drakthus's blood freeze. Zevia stood in what appeared to be a primitive medical facility, but she was unrestrained, unguarded. More disturbing still was her posture relaxed, almost protective of the small human male standing beside her. Commander Drakthos, she said, her voice carrying across space with perfect clarity. I am unharmed and have completed my reconnaissance. Of Earth, I request immediate audience to discuss my findings. Protocol demanded that Drakthos transport her aboard immediately, debrief her in private, and proceed with invasion planning. But something in Zevia's bearing, in the way she positioned herself slightly in front of the human, set off alarm signals in his tactical mind. Princess, he replied carefully, you will transport aboard at once. Your mission parameters did not include extended contact with the indigenous population. My mission parameters were to assess Earth's strategic value and defensive capabilities. Zevia corrected, and Drakthos noted the subtle emphasis on assess rather than catalog for destruction. I have done so. My findings require discussion before any further action is taken. Behind her, the human doctor Marcus Thorne, according to their intelligence files, stood quietly. He showed no signs of coercion or fear, which was unusual for a species that should be terrified of first contact with a superior civilization. Princess Zevia, Drakthos said, his tone carrying the weight of military authority, you have 30 minutes to conclude whatever business requires your attention. Then you will transport aboard for debriefing. The invasion fleet requires your intelligence to proceed. But even as he spoke, Drakthos recognized something troubling in Zevia's expression. In their decades of service together, he had seen her conquer worlds with ruthless efficiency, had watched her make the hard choices that Empire demanded. He had never seen her hesitate. Commander, she said quietly, what if we're wrong about them? The question struck the bridge like a physical blow. Junior officers exchanged glances, while Drakthos felt something cold settle in his chest. In all their years of conquest and expansion, Zevia had never questioned the righteousness of their cause. Wrong about what, Princess? About the necessity of conquest. About the assumption that might makes right. Zevia's golden eyes held his gaze across the void of space. What if there's another way? Drakthos closed the transmission with a gesture, his mind racing. Princess Zevia, heir to the Andorian throne and architect of a dozen successful campaigns, was questioning the fundamental principles of their civilization. Either she had been compromised by alien influence, or she had discovered something that challenged everything they believed. Either way, the situation had just become far more complicated than a simple rescue operation. The mountain clearing where three worlds converged was silent except for the whisper of wind through ancient pines. Marcus stood between Agent Cross and Zevia, acutely aware that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity faced annihilation or alliance. Above them, Commander Drakthus's ship hung like a dark star against the dawn sky, its weapon systems visible even to the naked eye. Below, Agent Cross's tactical team had taken positions around the clearing's perimeter, their own. Weapons inadequate, but ready. "This is madness," Agent Cross whispered, though her voice carried steel beneath the fear. "We're negotiating the survival of our species with beings who could obliterate us without effort." Zevia's golden eyes held a strange serenity as she watched her commander's ship descend. "Sometimes madness is the only path to wisdom," she replied. "My people have spent millennia believing that strength alone determined worth. Perhaps it's time to discover what we've been missing." The air crackled with energy as a transport beam materialized Commander Drakthos and his honor guard. The four-armed warrior's presence seemed to darken the very air around him, his ceremonial armor bearing the scars of countless conquests. Behind him, two elite soldiers flanked the group, their weapons humming with barely contained power. "Princess Zevia Morthic," Drakthos intoned, his voice carrying the formal cadence of imperial protocol. "By order of the High Council, you are commanded to return for debriefing. Your extended contact with the indigenous population has raised concerns about compromised judgment." Marcus felt his heart sink. This was it, the moment when cosmic politics would override the fragile connection he'd built with Zevia. But as he watched her step forward, he saw not submission in her posture, but resolve. "Commander," she said, her voice ringing with royal authority, "I stand before you not as a compromised operative, but as a princess of the realm who has made a discovery that could reshape our empire's destiny." Drakthos's alien features remained impassive, but Marcus caught the slight tilt of his head that suggested attention. "Explain." "For 3 centuries, I have served the empire's expansion through conquest and subjugation. I believed, as we all do, that superior strength grants the right to dominance. But this human," she gestured toward Marcus, "showed me something our civilization has forgotten: the power of compassion without expectation of reward." "Sentiment," Drakthos dismissed. "A weakness that inferior species mistake for virtue. Is it?" Zevia challenged, stepping closer to her former mentor. "When Dr. Thorne found me broken and dying, he risked his safety to save someone he'd never met. Not for gain, not for advantage, but because he recognized suffering and chose to act against it. That choice made by someone we would consider primitively weak saved the life of an imperial princess." Agent Cross moved forward carefully, her training warring with instinct. "Commander Drakthos, what Princess Zevia discovered isn't human weakness. It's human strength. We survive not through individual power, but through collective support. We advance not by conquering others, but by lifting each other up." The alien commander's gaze shifted between the humans and his princess, calculating variables in an equation that no longer balanced as expected. "You propose alliance with a species that cannot defend itself against us." "I propose partnership with a species that doesn't need to," Marcus said, finding courage in desperation. "Your technology is superior, your military might unquestioned. But we offer something you may have lost in your expansion: the ability to grow through cooperation rather than conquest." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant call of mountain birds greeting the dawn. Then Drakthos spoke, his words carrying the weight of civilizations. "Princess Zevia, return to the ship. Bring the humans as ... cultural advisors. The High Council will evaluate this unprecedented situation." As the transport beam began to form around them, Zevia's hand found Marcus's. In that simple touch, 2 worlds reached toward an uncertain but hopeful future.